Welcome to Cybercamping, and again we are sending live from the Industrial Security Conference in Copenhagen. And today, this morning, I have Joe with me. Welcome, Joe.
Welcome. Thank you.
And so nice that you can join this little talk. Before we start, I always say that whatever said on this interview not necessarily represent our company's opinion. So now it's said, everything is good. So, but welcome, Joe.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Joe, would you start telling a little bit about yourself, your career, your way into cybersecurity? It's okay to start from way back.
Well, I'll jump around a little bit. So currently,
good.
I'm with the MITRE Corporation, where
Yes.
I do work including managing parts of the MITRE attack framework, which
cool.
I'm sure some listeners are probably familiar with.
We hope, otherwise they should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
But for those who aren't, the MITRE attack framework is a standardization of adversary behaviors identified in the wild or in actual intrusions, and keeping that framework up to date and managing the content within it.
Yeah,
but
amazing.
I've been in the security industry now for 15 years.
Oh, cool.
So getting up there at this point. But I had a really weird entry into the field. So in university, I did not study computers. I studied philosophy.
Philosophy? Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I went to graduate school for a bit, didn't really like that. And then I took a number of different jobs. And it really wasn't until I joined the U.S. Navy where I was given my introduction into computer security. I joined the Navy like, I will see the world. I will go and sail. Exactly. And instead, like, no, you will sit in an office and you will work on computers. And it's like, oh. Okay.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So
and I saw your title from that time. It's on LinkedIn. It's totally cool. It was something about encryption and so on, right?
So the field is called Cryptographic Warfare Officer or Information Warfare Officer. It's changed a bit.
Sounds so cool.
It sounds cool. It sounds cooler than it is. But that's really where I got my start in security. And then from there on out, I went to the U.S. Department of Energy, where I ran the incident response team at one of the U.S. national laboratories. Then I worked in the private sector at several companies for many years, and now I'm with the MITRE Corporation.
Oh, amazing! So. And regarding the MITRE, I see. I really love that framework, and it helps so much making visibility and control for what can go wrong. But I see you also now had made something for OT, for mobile, other frameworks. But it started with primarily the IT side, right?
Right. So the attack framework began as a way of cataloging adversary actions in enterprise IT environments. So across Windows, Mac OS, Linux, network appliances and devices, and similar. But as you would imagine, there are other areas of security as well, like mobile devices, industrial control systems. And so there are versions of attack that are built specifically for the nuances or around the specifics of those operating ecosystems as well.
Yeah, cool. So it's not a secret that you have been to this conference sometimes. So how did you get into coming to Copenhagen, helping starting up a conference like this?
So I do quite a bit of work in the Nordics, actually. So in Denmark and Norway particularly, and then I'm in Sweden occasionally as well. Just one of those things that you meet some people at events, and it's like, oh, you should come here and do this. And then as a result of that, a friend of mine introduced me to the organizers for Industrial Security Conference Copenhagen, and initially asked me to speak, and then asked me like, oh, would you mind being on the program committee as well? And it's like, that's okay.
Cool.
And it's been a pleasure to be involved. I think this is a very good event. It's a very good community. Certainly the event, I think, has grown from being very Danish in origin to being more Northern European to being more international in outlook, which has been very exciting to see over the last 4 or 5 years.
Amazing. So when you're not working, what are you then doing? Do you have any hobbies, things you do, or are you working all the time?
going to sound sad, and it's like, people don't work all the time? No, but seriously, I like going hiking. I like to spend time with my kids and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So not quite as much camping as our setup today would indicate.
Okay. And hiking in Denmark, it's kind of hard, right? So
well, I mean, where I live in the mountains, so it's quite nice. Where the scenery is quite attractive, and there's some interesting and some challenging hikes to go on. Mm-hmm.
And it's good to come out and forget everything about.
Exactly.
Yeah. I could see that your career, you jumped from the military into the incident response, and then you have been threat analyzing stuff. So what do you think is the biggest threat right now?
Ourselves?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, it's one of those things that certainly none of this would matter if there weren't adversaries or entities out there that wanted to do us harm or to extract value from victims. But I think we as defenders, we as network owners and operators are doing those adversaries too many favors, and we're making their lives too easy. So in fact, there was a session just prior to coming over here where at the beginning they talked about going back to 2016 with Rob Joyce, who used to run part of the National Security Agency in the U.S., had made a social media post about like, okay, again, this is 2016, 8 years ago at this point. Multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, backups, encryption at rest, and we've known this for a while, and we still don't do these things.
Okay.
So if we were actually applying these sorts of items, we would make adversaries' lives so much more difficult than they are today. Yeah. So certainly there's lots of threats that are out there, and we should be responsive to them, but we should also be very much understanding what could we be doing better, and how are we allowing these adversaries to operate freely? Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So actually, a little back to the basic. Someone said a long time ago that could stop a lot of the stuff you also look into. Perhaps. We are talking a lot about the young people that wants to work in cybersecurity, and that it's kind of hard to get in, and the companies may not, give them a chance. How do you see? Is there a problem here about getting young people giving the first job in cybersecurity? Or
it's interesting because you see stories about there's so many unfilled cybersecurity positions. We need so many people, and we don't have them. And then, like you're saying, you have others where it's like, well, I'm trying to get into this field and I can't. Yeah. And one of those has to be wrong. They can't both be correct, or else that's something very, very odd. Yeah. So it is interesting to try to figure that out. I do think that there is a disconnect between the skills that are needed to be successful in information security versus the skills that are often taught and that candidates come in with. Yeah. I think there's an overemphasis on knowing specific technologies and not as enough emphasis on being able to critically think or to be a more flexible, more general understanding of how do systems function, how do we apply defensive decision making and similar.
Yeah. Okay, so I totally agree. There must be some gap there. Yeah. Of course, you follow along with the new threats and the work with Mitra, but is there any places, podcasts, something that you get some knowledge from that you use often, or where do you get new knowledge from?
So I'm always a big fan of the Risky Biz podcast. Yeah. So that is Patrick Gray and others in Australia. They do a very good job of covering the security landscape and the latest news, and often very humorous commentary. Yeah.
So that's a good way of
Yeah, but certainly, I don't know, social media used to be a decent way of finding things, and now that ecosystem is fragmented a bit as different things have sort of changed ownership and similar. But trying to find out what is the latest in terms of news, whether that be blogs, finding reputable sources of information security news and similar, I think is a very good way to keep up to date with what's going on within this space.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Let's say that one night you was allowed to make one demand that all companies should do in order to raise their security? What would that be?
Multi-factor authentication.
Multi-factor authentication. Okay,
Yeah.
that was a simple answer. Yeah.
Well, close to that would be password managers, but that could be a little difficult sometimes. But it just straight up multi-factor authentication, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It seems silly because your banking app or whatever will now have multi-factor authentication, but we run power plants without multi-factor authentication. It seems like a strange imbalance.
Yeah.
But if we could do that everywhere, I think we would be in a much better place than we are today.
Yeah. Is there a gap into OT that some of the devices can't? Or are there solutions out there? Do you know of that?
I mean, there are certainly solutions that are being rolled out, and there is a bit of friction, or certainly learning a different way of operating as a result of implementing multi-factor into environments like OT.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible.
No.
And I don't think we as practitioners, we as asset owners and operators have done as much to advocate to the system builders and the vendors that are producing the systems we work with to implement these items in a way that makes sense. Because the demand signal hasn't been there, unfortunately.
Yeah, cool. As you know, we have the super hard cyber quiz.
Yes.
It consists of 3 questions.
Okay.
Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Do you want to do hardening or monitoring?
I would say hardening, because certainly monitoring is critical, but your monitoring question or what you need to monitor is going to depend upon how it is that you've hardened your systems.
Yeah.
So first harden, and then based upon what you're able to harden, then apply monitoring afterwards.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. You managed the first question. So
Okay.
That's good. Question 2, when we talk about OT networks, cloud or on-prem?
Cloud is coming. It's not there yet,
No?
but it's coming.
Yeah.
So for now, on-prem, but I reserve the right to change that answer as time goes on.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
What do you think about that development?
So it's interesting because on the one hand, cloud increases attack surface by design because you are now extending the network boundary beyond on-premise or what to incorporate other infrastructure outside of the plant environment. But as a result, you're also building up, hopefully, resilience because you're actually implementing cloud architecture in a sane way and not everything is in the same cloud location. So if that goes offline, then you're offline, which unfortunately some people do. So yeah, it's really about understanding what are the gains and losses in terms of security, availability, and redundancy that become possible with a cloud implementation.
Oh, cool. Yes. And the last question. Oh, now it's going to be hard. Ransomware, should you pay or don't pay?
I think I'm obliged to say don't pay.
Yeah.
But that's hard if you're a victim.
Yes.
Certainly it would be, if everyone agreed to not pay ransoms, that would go a long way towards crippling the ransomware ecosystem.
Yeah.
But for individuals that require restoration of their networks and so forth, that's a very hard thing to tell them to do.
Yeah.
That it's like, oh, you can go out of business or not have access or not be able to operate because of ransomware. It's like, oh, shoot, but I need this back online, so I'll pay.
Yeah.
So in an ideal world, don't pay.
Yeah.
Reality, maybe sometimes you pay.
And maybe in the ideal world, you want to prevent this and have successful, as you told before, backups. Make sure that it not influence you if you get hit. Are there any trends in all the stuff you're looking at, if you can say it? Are there any trends about malware and stuff that looks more into OT as a traditional IT malware that also have maybe looking for specific OT protocols? Or is there? Do you guys see something coming new? Or
I think what's interesting is how much we're seeing that isn't new. That a lot of what passes for OT intrusions these days appears to be the recycling of IT tradecraft because OT environments have become very IT-like in structure. If you're dealing with an engineering workstation or a human-machine interface or similar, that you're dealing with fairly standard Windows systems, fairly standard web server software and similar, that a lot of the tradecraft or a lot of the techniques that are applicable in IT environments can be extended into OT environments. And so, you go to conferences like these and you hear references to things like the IT-OT convergence. Well, it's already happened, and as a result of that happening, a lot of the same threats, a lot of the same actions that adversaries can take in enterprise IT environments are now very applicable to OT environments, all the way up until you get to the point where you're trying to interact with a physical device.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I see the same at least. So that's apparently something that's going on. So, Joe, it has been a pleasure to have you here.
Likewise.
So nice to hear your story. And as all my guests get is this badge that, of course, cannot be copied, but only guests that have been in the chairs have this badge.
Okay.
And if you're next year also at this conference and have it on, I buy you a beer.
Okay.
So that's how it works.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Joe. I hope you enjoyed it also.
I did.
Yeah, cool. And we are sending at 1 o'clock again, and it's Hvem from the Danish sector cert coming, and the interview will be in Danish at that time. But take care out there. Have a nice day.
Thank you.